this is kind of the first proper video of the A course, and this video is about pronunciation, right? So I want you to be able to, if you see a word, know how to say it, maybe with a little bit of context. If you hear a word, know how to write it down, which you wouldn't need any context for, and also know the letters of what I have here written as den Alfbet, which, as you can imagine, is just a borrowing of the alphabet from English or from Greek or from every language kind of has the same name for it. So I've done some kind of preparation, but this was from a couple of days ago, so I'm just going to see what's still here. So these are the consonant letters, and we're going to talk about vowels separately in a moment. And what you basically need to know is that E and H, to use the English names, are not your friends. Everything else is probably fine. So on here, H and R are in red because they're that little bit more difficult, particularly with H and R, because the sounds in H and R are not sounds that we have in English. But if you've learned German, for example, every sound in English and German covers Wølfterek. And if you haven't, then you'll just have to learn them. But learning sounds isn't that difficult. So first of all, I'm just going to tick off some letters. I'm going to tick off B, D, F, K, L, M, N, P, S, T, and V. And the reason I'm going to tick these off are, these are the same as you'd expect them to be in English. So B, D, F, K, L, M, N, P, S, T, V. Right? So nice and easy. They're literally the same. Obviously, I know in English different letters can be silent or have weird pronunciations. In Wølfterek, no silent letters, and except from when I say otherwise, essentially, each letter is pronounced one way, and the exceptions to that are H and E, hence them not being your friends, because you might need to know a bit more in order to know how to pronounce them. The two other ones in black that I haven't ticked here yet, because they're like that little step up, are J and W. The letter J is always pronounced Y, as in yacht, not J, as in jester. Wølfterek doesn't have the J sound, so it's just always going to be Y, like, for example, in German or many languages, like in Swedish as well. The letter W, again, like in German, is always going to be the, and it's going to be pronounced exactly the same as the letter V. And this is why I said that, it's not always precise about which letter you use. Most of the time it's going to be V, but sometimes we are going to use W, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Moving on to R now. If you've learnt German, you'll know that the letter R in German isn't pronounced R, and in fact, if you learn any language, the chance of having R in it is pretty unlikely. Like Spanish and French and stuff, they don't have it. The one in Wølfterek is the same as German, and it's R. And if you've learned IPA, this is going to be the upside down capital letter R, to use its kind of drawn out name, the R sound. If you don't know how to make that sound, if you want to learn how to make it, my advice is that you go and look on YouTube, or you go and look for a YouTube tutorial. I'm not going to explain in detail because I'm hoping that most people either know it, they can work it out pretty quickly, or they can just go on YouTube. The letter H, I'm going to talk about now, but you're going to understand it more, if you like, as we go on, once we talk about the vowels, because how the letter H is pronounced is about the vowel it is next to in a syllable. So here you can see I've written out H-A, H-O, H-U, H-I, H-E, H-G, and actually really this one's more like G-H, because you can't have an H then a G. And we'll talk about G in a minute. You may have noticed it's not a consonant, it's not on the consonant list. But basically, these top three, when the H is in a syllable next to it, so either before or after, but a syllable is going to be consonants and vowels. So when the H is next to those vowels, it's going to be pronounced Ch. So if you've learnt German, like the word Nacht, it's that Ch sound. and Hebrew has it as well, and plenty of languages have it. And in IPA, that's the letter X, the lowercase little letter X. And if it's with an I, an E, or after a G, which would be say after a palatalized vowel, which we'll come on to in a minute, it's pronounced hier. Like in German, just for another example, the word ich. And that in IPA, if you know IPA, is the C cedilla. Oh, we've got a bit of lag there. And let me just check I'm not lagging to the people who are watching live. Possibly. That's their problem. Let me just check as well that that the recording is working, and it seems to be, so we're all good. If you've learnt German as well, you may have heard of something called Ich laut and Ach laut. And this is the same phenomenon. In fact, from a linguistics perspective, this phenomenon has been inherited through the Germanic languages in some places, and obviously it's survived in the conlang. So some vowels are going to pronounce here, and some vowels is going to be pronounced h. And this is to do with complicated things where it is in the mouth, but you'll find that this actually makes it easier and nicer to speak the language than always saying h, always saying here. And when we kind of come onto the vowels in a second, you'll see that when we talk about the sounds that the vowels make. I'm going to return now to V and W. So V and W are pronounced the same way. So if you see one, it's going to be the. So you don't need to worry when you see it about how to say it. But if you hear a the sound, you need to worry about how to write it down. And basically, if in doubt, it's the letter V. The letter W is pretty rare. So the letter W only appears at the start of words. I don't know if I'm kind of writing across the face cam now. Only appears at the start of words, and it never appears in verbs. Sorry, not vowels. It never appears in verbs. And there are reasons for this, which we're not going to get into. I'm not going to waste your time. But where we find W's tend to be systematic. There tend to be places we find W's and places we don't find W's. And so, for example, I'll just tell you now, but obviously we'll learn this properly another time. The question words all start with a W, all of them. None of them start with a V, right? So there's a system to it. But fundamentally, you're going to just have to learn the W words one by one. There's not that many of them. And the most obvious one that you've hopefully come across by now, because otherwise it's like, what are you doing, is Wølfterek. So the name of the language itself is a W word. So it has a W at the start of it. We can't have a W anywhere else. And that's because the actual etymology of this word, where it comes from, is it comes from et wolf, which means a wolf, and that itself is a W word. So that's kind of why it's been inherited in. But I will point them out as we go along, as we come across them, because ultimately you'll be learning the W words effectively one by one, or something like it's all the question words, and everything else is going to be a V. The other thing is, these kind of help you if you see a letter how to pronounce it, but this doesn't talk about kind of where things come in pairs and stuff. You'll see things, for example, a V doesn't appear at the end of a consonant cluster, so we can't have KV. You'll see then that becomes KF, so KV isn't possible. Instead you have KV, but that isn't really about how you pronounce things or how you write things down. So as a user of the language, that's not as important. But when we do things like when we learn about past participles, you'll see this one come up a lot. So there are some rules that I'm not explaining because it's not actually going to help you, that you're then going to kind of figure out and see over time. And I'm now going to move on to the vowels. And the vowels are in some ways easier than the consonants, but also in some ways harder than the consonants. And we'll get on to some more detail of that in a second. And sorry if it's lagging, by the way, for those who are watching live. So you may notice that they've got kind of slashes. So there's kind of 3 columns. These are basically, let me make my pen smaller. I think it'll be easier. There we go. So these are the short, the long, and the palatized vowels. You don't need to know these names, but it's probably help you if it does. So they kind of come in a set, and you may have noticed that the letter G hasn't shown up yet, and that's because it's not a consonant and it's not a vowel effectively. It's like a little tag along that tags along to these specific 3 vowels, A, E, and O, and changes their sound. So you'll never see it on its own, and it always just morphs letter for it. It's more like an accent, a diacritic, than it is its own letter, but it is officially a letter of the alphabet. So there are 5 kind of base vowels. You may notice there's no letter U. Instead we have U. And the ones in red are the ones we don't have in English. And technically, this one here should be in red, but I'm going to let people get away with pronouncing it close enough that it's the same as something in English. And we'll get onto that in a minute. So we're going to start with A. We're going to start at the top, but we're going to skip the ones that are problematic. As I said at the start, E is not your friend, and we'll come on to Y in a second. And really, this should kind of be like there should be 2 E's here. I'm going to talk about that in a second. So let's start with A, nice and easy one. A, if we write it in IPA, for those who know IPA, but don't worry if you don't, it's this. And this is the R in farm. It is never the A in cat. Don't be tempted to say it when it's a short vowel, because it just never is. So for example, this word here, which I know lots of you are going to mispronounce, because you naturally think that that's Hamlaw, but it's not Hamlaw, it's Harmlaw. Almost imagine you're someone very, very posh and well-spoken who says Harmlaw. And the long form of A, so when we have a double A, it's just twice as long. So instead of R, it's R. So for example, let me think of a good word here. So lasert, which is to read. If we take the word last, which is a book, the A sound is literally just twice as long. And this AG here is I. So like in the word tie, like tying a knot, it's just the I sound. It's the same as the English I. We're going to skip E. I'm going to come back to it, even though some of it I know is in black. I'm going to come back to it. The I is the letter I, is the I in hit. It is never the E in heat. And this is a mistake I'm sure lots of you will be tempted to make in certain situations where in English it's kind of the same, so it's spelled the same as English, and where you'd have an E sound, but it's always going to be the I in hit, not the E in heat. And if you know IPA, that's going to be this little capital I. Now, the long form is not just I. Unfortunately, it's not just long. It's slightly more difficult than that. It's actually ear. So I'm going to write this out in IPA first. Because if you know IPA to a good standard, you might know how to pronounce this, hopefully. But then I'm going to explain it for those who don't, which is probably most of you, and that's okay. So in the word here, you make the I sound and then the sound in the word like about. And it's very, very similar to this. And in fact, if you say ear like that, I will let you off. I think that's close enough. But it's not perfect. So it's ear. And it's a bit like, if you imagine when you're saying the word here, you might feel in your mouth the vowel kind of falls back and down. And imagine that you do the same thing falling back but not falling down. So if you just kind of do that now, microphones are off, no one's going to hear you. just trying to make it feel like you're going back, but not going down. So rather than ear, falling back and down, it's ear. And if you say it falling back and down, if you like, I'm not going to rush to complain. Honestly, it's fine. Now, moving on to O, in fact, I should just say, sorry, there's no IG. So IG doesn't exist. There's no palatized form of I, to say it nicely. You just won't find it. It just doesn't exist. And in speaking grammatically, and any time, I'm not expecting you to remember this, but just for interest, any time we have to, for grammatical reasons, palatize an I, we either don't and we just make it long, or it just becomes AG instead. So I would become AG. But we're not going to talk about that today because it's just so not relevant. Moving on to the letter O. The letter O, kind of continuing our streak of like it's not what you think it is. It's not the O in pot. It's the O in port. And if you know IPA, that's our backwards letter C, right? Or. But don't make it, because obviously the example I'm giving port, it's long, but make it short if it's short, so O, and long if it's long, O-R. So it's O or O, not O and O. In English, kind of, we almost have O as the long version of O, and obviously that's not what we're doing here. Now, OG, if we look at the English word boy, which actually could be like that, or like that with this pronunciation. So if we look at the English word boy, it is 99% close. But if I'm going to be really picky, certainly when I say boy, you'll have to kind of think for yourself here. I do O and then I. That's what I'm actually doing. And as I've just said, it's not O, it's O, right? If you can kind of hear the slight difference there, it's port, not pot. So really, we should be doing O and an N, which sounds like oi. And they're very similar, but, well, in fact, I'm just going to probably say that if you say the oi in boy, you're fine. I don't think anyone's going to notice unless they're really pedantic. And if they are to some extent, that's their problem. But if you're listening to this and you are a peasant, that's something you might care about, and I'm going to let you care about. We're going to skip the slashed O. And the reason we're going to skip the slashed O is that the easiest way to pronounce the slashed O is based on the pronunciation of E. So we're going to talk about E now, which I know you've been kind of nervously waiting for. And then once we've talked about E, I'm going to explain O really quickly. But also what's easy about O, which I'll come back to, is it only has a short form. There is no double, like there's no OO like that. It only has a short form. So it'll be very quick to explain. So let's move on to E. So the main pronunciation of E, our primary pronunciation of E, I need to scroll down, don't I, is the IPA that is the letter E. And I'm going to start this by saying this is not air. This is not the air in bed. It's not that sound. For those who've learnt German, which I'm aware isn't everyone, but I'm just going to start with that because it's easy. It's the air in Bewegung. So I'm going to write that word out, Bewegung. It's that second one. And that might also help you hear it if I say Bewegung. Even if you don't know anything about that word, doesn't matter. And German actually has both the air in bed and the air sound. So it's kind of useful to compare them if you know German. And if you don't, the other example that has been told to me is when Yorkshire people, I don't know if you spell it E-up or EH-up too much. I don't think they write it down particularly often. But when they say A-up, they don't say air-up and they don't say A-up. It's not like the A in day. It's kind of like, I don't want to say halfway in between because it's not linguistically accurate, but it may help you think about it. It's the air sound, air. Now, again, if you really think, do you know what, I don't know what this sound is, I'd suggest you go watch a YouTube video on it. It is just the letter E in IPA, and it's the kind of Yorkshire E, if you like. It's a Scottish accent as well, plenty of accents. So do make it, because unlike other places where I said I'm not going to pick you up, I am going to pick you up if you say eh. It's not a. And there's a reason, which I'm not going to tell you, that I'm going to pick you up, but I don't want you to get in a bad habit now. So that the reason we're starting with pronunciation is get good habits, then learn how to pronounce the words, or you will end up being really, really angry later. However, the letter E is not always pronounced A. So, in prefixes and suffixes, it's pronounced This is schwa, and in IPX it's this. And the example Google likes, I really like. So, in moment ago, it's these two, moment ago, and it's the sound, and it's kind of it's in loads of words in English. Kind of all these vowels have changed to and at the start, you probably won't remember, but I said that sometimes you need a little bit of context to know how you pronounce a word, and this is where you need that little bit of context, because if you see an E, you need to know if it's a prefix or a suffix. And obviously, if it's right in the middle of a word, it's not a prefix or a suffix. But I'm going to give an example of this now. So this word is pronounced veliet. So not veliet. If you say veliet, it's not good. It's veliet to kind of exaggerate it. And you may notice that here, I didn't say veliet, I said veliet, because this is actually a verb, and all verbs end in et. So in German, all verbs end in en. In French, you have your er and your ir and your re verbs, and like that in Wølfterek, the verbs all end in et, mostly end in et. I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot here. Some verbs don't, but for now, all verbs end in et, and I will kind of spoil the bliss of ignorance later. So when we see et as a suffix, this is always pronounced ut. Now, there's a problem with this, which is if there's et at the end of a word, that doesn't mean it's a suffix. And quite a lot of nouns have et at the end of them and are the same written as verbs, which also have et, but the et is a suffix. And that might sound like, what the hell have I just said? So I'm going to write this out. Now I can't, in fact, I can use veliet as an example. You may have understood that I said veliet. If I say veliet with a kind of a proper e at the end, not like a suffix e, it's a noun. And I'm going to tell you what it means now. So veliet means, as a verb, veliet with an at the end means to, and this is kind of your first vocab, this is to pick or to choose. And it's from Old Norse, but it happens to be related to the German word wählen, which also means to choose. So that might help you. And as a verb, it means to pick or to choose. But as a noun, as a feminine noun, so if you remember the table, probably won't remember the table, et veliet. This is a choice, or if you take a pick, right? So it's like taking the verb and making it a noun, which different names for in different languages. But in this situation, we call these active. So in Wølfterek, kind of intralingually within the language, we call it an active noun, and it's feminine. They're always feminine. And these are pronounced differently. It's the same spelling, V-E-L-J-E-T, but they are pronounced differently. And they're pronounced differently because in veliet, et is a suffix, and in veliet, the noun, it's not. And there are various situations where this is annoying, and I'm going to take you through quickly the most common suffixes you're going to see, but you don't need to really remember this because obviously we're going to come back to this as we use these suffixes. Generally, you're going to see a lot of en and et as suffixes, and just an e on its own, which I'm going to come back to in a second. And the prefix you're often going to see is k. So this is not ke, it's k because it's a prefix. And you may remember in the introduction to the A course I did that I took you through the pronouns. At least I'm pretty sure I did. And I said that I, like the first person singular, is yay, which we can now work out why it's yay. Hang on, I might skip something. Okay, it's pronounced yay. And the plural form, so this is I, the word we is yeken. Not yeken, yeken. And this is because, if you were wondering, you probably weren't wondering at the time, you may be wondering now, the reason that it's like this is because it's literally just the plural. So it's like if we in English were I's and they were like he's, it'd be like doing that. Now, the reason there's a K that we're not going to talk about, basically it's just because it's easier. But you may notice, so toy, which you should know how to say now, becomes toyen, and we will discuss this bit in a second. And han, for example, he or she, becomes hanen, and it, hun, becomes hornen. And we're going to come back to some of these bits in a second, but the bit I want to emphasize for now is that they end in un, not n, because they are literally just plurals. It's like saying I's, you's, he's, its, right? To pluralize them. So, returning to up here, short E and long E are like short A, long A, short O, long O. I is the only exception to that one. So as short is air, long is air. So for example, if you were at the time of recording, the word of the day today was mek, which is radiation, or in the plural it means, like chiefly in the plural it means emissions, like from a car. And this comes from the verb meket, which is to radiate or to emit. This probably isn't useful vocab, it's just the one that was on the top of my head because it's the word of the day when I'm kind of doing this live. So in this one, it's mek because it's short, but in this one, because it's long, it's literally just about twice as long, so meket. And notice how it's not meket, it's meket. This is a short little e because the et is the suffix that makes it a verb. And so that's a little bit of context. When you see this, you're going to have to see it's a verb. Now, I can tell you just for a fact, meket, like as a noun, doesn't exist, not a thing. There is no active noun like that of this verb. But you might not know that, so it's important that you just kind of keep an eye when you see these et words, what's a noun, what's a verb. Equally, some nouns just end in en, but that doesn't make them a plural, so you need to be careful before you say incorrectly. And this sounds really difficult, but I promise you it's not actually that difficult, because once you recognize the words, you recognize the words, right? And there are plenty of times in English where we have the same word that can be pronounced multiple ways or stressed multiple ways, and it's never a problem. because you just know the words. E.g., I mentioned this accidentally when I realised I hadn't told you. It is the A in day, same as English. And this is because when you say A in English, you're actually using the air that some of you are now struggling to pronounce. It's a weird thing about English where actually we've kept this sound, the air sound, in some situations, but not on its own. So then when I say do it on its own, people are like, oh my gosh, how do I do that? So it is actually there. When you say day, you're actually making the air sound as part of that. But it's the same, therefore, as English, as the English A. It's completely the same. And we're finally going to move on to U. And I did say that this is not, when I kind of said that H and E are not your friends, there's no reason why this isn't your friend. So if I take the word Wølfterek, you may notice it's in there. What else is in there? It's R. In fact, the irony is, if you can say the name of the language, you're doing pretty well. Because this is the sneaky air we don't like. So this is the air that we kind of don't like. And it also has the because EK is what we call a non-productive, as in all of linguistics isn't a term specifically for language. It's what we call non-productive suffix. And what that basically means is it used to be a suffix for things and it isn't anymore, but it's still there in words, which is why this is the So it's not Wølfterek, it's Wølfterek, because it is a suffix. It's just that we don't use that suffix anymore, like actively to make more words. And it obviously has a W at the start, which makes it a W word. It makes it one of those difficult words that for some reason has a W. It has the R, the German, kind of the same one as German, the R, rather than R, which some of you might need to learn. And finally, it has the U. And the way to make this is you start with the air, the one that, the kind of the new E, not the one that isn't normally in English, the air, sorry, and you round your lips, so air, right? If you try not then to move anything else while you're rounding your lips, and then if you were to do it with unrounded lips, it'd be velf, and then when you do it with rounded lips, it's velf. And if you know German, this is the same sometimes as the, so the O umlaut in German changes sound, but if you say the word Flöte, it's the U sound in Flöte. So if you know German, that might be helpful for you. So that is what it is. The reason I said I'm going to come back to it is because it's a rounded version. Literally, that's the difference between it. It's the rounding of your lips. If you want to practice using rounding your lips to get the sound, use a combination that we have in English. An example I'm going to give for this is if you take like the in cup, and you round your lips, you get, well, in this situation, you get corp. Now, that's not really a word, because if you have an S, it then becomes core, I suppose, which is a word. But the in cup, if you then round your lips with that sound, you get the or in port. So if you want to practice rounding your lips while not moving anything else, you should be able to do this one correctly. And if you like, you can then kind of transpose that movement that you do from to or on air to u. So Wølfterek. And one thing that's weird about it is it often sounds a bit different when you say it on its own to when you say it as part of a word. But it's very rarely kind of on its own. There's one instance I can think of off the top of my head where you might find it kind of on its own. But generally we find the kind of packed up tightly within words. And the reason for this is, as I've now written over, so you can't see it, there's no other forms. And I said this, you can't have a long form though. So let's say we take a word, let me think of a word that has, I think the best example is going to actually be hun. Hun means it. So this means it. So if you're saying like it is, for your knowledge, is hun vas. Right? So it's the word it. This is going to be the best example. If we want to, you remember when I said that we pluralize the articles to get the plural forms? Well, actually, this is exactly what we're going to do here. So to get to they, for kind of like an inanimate they, because remember we have han and hun, like he and she and it. So to get to they, we take hun and we add en, but then because of syllable rules, this actually this o needs to become longer. This o needs to become twice as long. Now, for other vowels, this isn't a problem, right? So, for example, when we pluralize las, we get larsen. This isn't a problem, it just becomes two. But as we learned, we can't make it two. So the becomes or, which is or. So it like loses the slash, is one way you can. So you can either imagine it as it loses the slash and gets the r, or you can kind of imagine it as like the slash becomes the r, like that's the slash there on the right. That's kind of come from the o. And now, therefore, because of that, the plural is hornen. And remember, that's that at the end, not air, because it's a plural. And that's it. Like, if I just kind of zoom out to kind of let it sink in, that is how you pronounce letters. There's one thing we haven't done then. If we talked about how we pronounce letters, we haven't talked about how we stress words. Now, there's two types of stress. There's lexical stress, and there's prosodic stress. I'm just going to check I'm getting them the right way around because I don't want to kind of, ruin this entire lesson. So prosodic stress is stress within a sentence. So for example, you might say, if we take the sentence, I am your father, right? We can say, I am your father, I am your father, I am your father, and I am your father. And this is basically like the same university in languages. You can do that. You can pick a word to emphasize it, and therefore that's going to be exactly the same with Wølfterek. What is different between languages is lexical stress. So if we think about, I'm going to write down two words. These words mean different things in English depending on where you put the stress. So it's a good example. So project, if I tell someone to project their voice, then that's different to a project. For example, if we're doing a school project, they are different things, right? Equally, a convict is different to convicting someone. So the syllable you're choosing to stress affects the meaning of the word. Now, good news, this doesn't happen with Wølfterek. I was just demonstrating how this lexical stress works. Now, in Wølfterek, there are set rules for stress that are any word is only going to be stressed one way, but it's not as simple. So, for example, in French, you just always stress the last syllable. It's not as simple as that. So, we're going to take a word, right? We're going to take the word. I'm going to start with the word trekpas, and I nearly said trekpas, and that's just wrong. It's trekpas, and that means bearable, right? And we tend not to really use bearable that much in English these days. We tend to only talk about unbearable. I'm going to come to that in a moment, right? So trekpas, the first syllable is stressed. So it's not trekpas, it's trekpas. And there is a reason for this. In the word near trekpas, again, this second syllable is stressed. And this means unbearable, by the way, if you're wondering what unbearable is. And in my third example, which will be slujanen, the second syllable is stressed. And this means curtains, right? Probably less useful, right? But you're talking about curtains, I guess you can use slujanen, right? And this is kind of a bit of a difficult word to say, which is why I'm introducing it. So we're going to start. Now, obviously, you're not going to do this for every word. You'll get used to it quite quickly. I'm not doing this consciously. I'm just explaining how it works. We're going to start at the last syllable. If the last syllable contains a long vowel, then it's stressed. If it doesn't, it's not, and we kind of move left. And we keep doing this until we get to the start of the word. So for example, sluyanen, nun has a short vowel, right? It's a kind of single letter vowel, right? And literally that's what short is single letter, long is double letter. So it's not going to be nun, it's not going to be sluyanen. We're going to move left one. The syllable ya contains a double vowel, it's got that double A, so it's stressed. So therefore, it's sluyanen. There's no need to keep going left, we found our stressed syllable. In the word trekpas, pas has a short vowel, so it's not stressed. And trek is our first syllable. So even if, okay, trek doesn't contain a long vowel, but we can't keep moving left, like we physically can't keep going, there's no more syllables. So we are forced to make the first syllable stressed. So if there are no long vowels in the word, the first syllable is going to be stressed. Vreina as an example. Now, I've chosen this word because I'm going to try and demonstrate multiple things at once. Now, this means friend in the dative. So last time, it might not have been, I talked about the fact that when nouns are in the dative, they're going to change slightly. So this means on its own, this kind of thing, this means like to the friend, because it's in the dative, if someone just said kind of that on its own. But obviously, it might find different meanings within a sentence, right? So when we have an E at the end of a word, and I might have mentioned this earlier, I might not, if I can't remember, it's always a. It doesn't matter if it's a suffix or not, even though it kind of technically like always is. It's just a. No need to worry about whether no word is going to end in air. It's always just going to be a. So our second syllable n doesn't have a long vowel. It's just a, pretty short to me. And I is a long vowel. I know, okay, technically, like there's no syllables to the left, so it doesn't matter. But I just want to demonstrate that a palatalized vowel, so we have a G next to it, that counts as long as well because it's more than one letter, right? So our short ones are going to be A, E, I, O, U. Our long ones are going to be R, E, or I, A, or I. Right? So short on the left, long on the right. Pretty self-explanatory. It's literally whether it's one letter or two, that's how it turns out to be. Also notice that it's V at the start, so when we have VR together, that's still going to be a V sound. But there are some, because I just said before that sometimes it becomes a F, like a letter F, and that's pronounced F. But that will always be spelled out in front of you or said to you, so you don't need to worry about that consciously. It's just if you're wondering. Finally, I've just told you all this, but you may notice I've missed out near trekpas, and that's an exception, isn't it? Because let's write this word up big. So these are going to be our syllables. Okay, well, pas, that's a short, it's one letter, the A, so we're going to move left. Trek, one letter, we're going to move left. Near, well, it's our first syllable anyway, so we have to choose that, and it's actually got that long vowel as well, so it's perfect, right? So this is near pas, right? Well, no, it's not, unfortunately. It's actually the middle syllable trek, and this is because there's a very fixed exception. And this is because if we look at the word near trekpas, it starts with NIR. Now, this word near is, you're going to see it everywhere. And basically, the most important thing it does is it just makes everything it sees negative, right? It's like your kind of like ultimate negative, right? So when we take trekpas, which means unbearable, and we add near, we make it from bearable to unbearable. So this near here is a prefix. And there is a term for this, which you don't need to really worry about, but these are called deseparable adjectives. Definitely spelled that wrong. So these are called, if you're wondering, these are called deseparable adjectives. And basically it's because there are a list, and these are the list of prepositions essentially, and near. There are a list of particles that can be separable. And basically these kind of fly around and, do whatever they want, right? So for example, some examples of this are aunt, arth, near, also
Now, the correct pronunciation of these words is Heath and Bev, which I didn't get quite right in the video. I also just want to mention that hin is quite a common particle, which means in or into normally.
just two examples, Heath and Bev. And you learn these over time. Some are more common. Basically, the most common ones are going to be these three. And they kind of fly around annoyingly. And when you see these at the start of words, they're there because they come from a verb where these were attached to the end. So, for example, so going back, and I'll keep explaining this obviously again and again, and it will become clearer over time. Going back to these examples, I'm going to rub out my little curtains there. Our thought process for near trek pass should have been when we kind of skipped over pass, we skipped over trek, we got to near, we can't pick near, it's not allowed, right? Because this is our little kind of annoying little prefix, right? This is what's making it negative. So we go back and we say, well, actually, this trek here is like our actual first one because we don't care about the near, it's going away. The proper first one is the trek, so we choose that one. So it's near trek pass, not near trek pass. But honestly, I mean, obviously, the number of words it's going to affect is going to be a handful of nouns and adjectives. And obviously, for example, when you hear English learners pronounce or stress words wrong, especially from languages where they don't have lexical stress, they don't choose which words they stress, which syllables they stress in a word. It's it's a very small thing. But if you're the kind of person who feels like they want to get it right, then you want to get it right. And that's it. We've covered the letters of the alphabet, and I'm sorry, I should have put stress on here because we have covered stress. We've covered those four things, right? If you want, you can also see, might be of interest, the letters of the alphabet, as in if you want to, sing an alphabet song. I don't have a recorded alphabet song, and I think that would be quite cringe. But if you want to see what the letters of the alphabet are, as in like the names of the letters, they do have names because I wouldn't not think of making them. So I'm just going to kind of screen clip them into the document now, and that's going to kind of be the closing note, the letters. So in terms of the lesson today, we're just going to end on this. So what I kind of say overall is that the most important thing to take away, if you kind of can't really be bothered to take away everything, the most important thing to take away is how you pronounce those letters. And the difficult one, obviously, are H and E. And they're difficult because you have to adapt to the situation. And you'll find that the best way to learn to pronounce words is, of course, just to pronounce words, right? There's nothing much more than that you can do. So you'll find that as you go along, you will be more and more successful in that. And so therefore, the best way to encounter lots more words is to learn lots of words. And then as you learn a word, as you introduce a word, you'll know how to say it. And that's the cycle we want to put ourselves in. So for example, we can start with these letters of the alphabet, right? For example, this one here, the first letter of the alphabet is already going to introduce some difficulty. Because when you see A-R-N, you might think that's arn, because remember, if it was O-R-N, this would just be a long O. If this was I-R-N, this would just be a long I. But the long A and E are double A, double E. So when we see an A and an R, That is the R sound, that is the consonant. So this is R. Second letter, we've got a palatalized one. That's not beg. If you say beg, I'm gonna cry, right? Bay. Then day, and you can also just let it sink in. Think about the English alphabet song. We've got half as many letters. Actually, that's just a lie. We've got more than half that. We've got 2/3 as many letters. So at least your life is a little bit easier. And the spelling is very regular. So once you get your head over it, it will be fine. And for anyone who's listening live, I will now take questions if you have questions. And if you're not listening live, then goodbye and post questions in the comments.